Welcome back to the Empower LEP podcast. Today on the show, I have Erin Crawford. Erin is an LEP who was in California, then went over to Massachusetts, then came back and started her private practice up in Marin County. And her business is called Empowered Psych. And there's a dash in it, empowered-psych.com. That's her practice. Listen in because she is just yet another one of us inspired school psychologist turned LEPs who shares her story with us, and listen in. Welcome back to the Empower LEP podcast. I am here with Erin Crawford. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are welcome. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I have had some conversations with you over the time that you've been launching your practice. So I'm really excited to hear, kind of in a little while where you are now, but I'm really excited to hear just kind of about your journey. So thanks for
I'm honored to be here. Yeah, I love the podcast. It's the highlight of my week every Friday. It's so fun to listen.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. So tell me, Erin, first, just kind of go into where did you start? What were you doing? And what, take us through kind of that process to where you are today.
Yeah. Okay. I'm originally from the Bay Area. So that's, where I went to undergrad, and then after
Where'd you go?
UC Davis.
Okay.
And after undergrad, I got a job I was a psych major, but knew that I wanted to go to graduate school, but needed a little bit of a break from all the school, and it's quite expensive. So I worked in a very different field. I worked in financial consulting to the healthcare industry for a few years, which was fun, and, got to live the young person San Francisco city life, which was great. But eventually I knew I wanted to go back to graduate school. So I went back and got my degree in school psychology. And my first position out of graduate school was kind of unusual. I was working for a county office of education, and they organized their special education services into disability type. So I was primarily working with medically fragile and severely disabled students, which is an interesting place to start your school psychology career.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But it was amazing. And I got to see so many different classrooms. So lots of different teaching styles, lots of different, supports that are available for students with that type of profile. And I just learned a lot. So that was really amazing. And then my fiance was accepted to business school in the Boston area. So we went east, and luckily I was able to get a position at a really incredible school district just outside of Boston in a suburb called Newton, which is where Boston College is. And I worked at a really large high school, and it was such an amazing training experience because this particular district has a really huge focus on special education, and it's unlike a lot of California school districts, it's very well funded. That state and that, community in particular invest a lot of money on their public schools. So it was really neat to see what is possible when you have funds, whether that's staffing or programming. I got to see so many different types of ways you can support students, whether that's alternative high schools or stabilization programs for students who have, had psychiatric or mental health emergencies that need kind of a landing pad before they're thrown back into their large comprehensive public school. And they had that at the middle, elementary, and high school levels, which was just incredible. Incredible team of school psychologists. It was a large district, so there was 26 of us.
Yeah.
So, lots of people to collaborate with and ask questions. And it was just a tremendous, professional learning opportunity.
Yeah.
And my colleague was a very seasoned school psychologist and was just amazing. So I learned a ton. And I actually had started thinking about the, working privately path when we lived out there. We lived out there for almost 8 years. I got my license to work privately. Massachusetts is one of the few states, along with California, where you're allowed to work privately. And it wasn't too hard to get that license. So I got the license, and I was trying to decide, do I want to leave the schools? Kind of what is the path here? And starting to network with some people just to learn more. And then the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
So, like everyone's plans, things just sort of went out the window. And my family's ultimate goal was to get back to California because that's where my family is. So we moved back during the pandemic. So that plan sort of got put on pause for a few years. But, eventually I started the application process in California, took the exam, and was approved and all that. So that was about a year ago.
Okay. Did you ever go back and work in schools in California?
I did. Yeah. It felt like moving to a new state, buying a new house. I have two young children. It felt like maybe that was too much to deal with, and throwing in a totally new professional experience and starting a business. So I worked in the schools for 3 more years, and then just recently made the switch.
Yeah. Yeah. And so are you completely out of schools now?
I am. Yeah. I worked for my prior district part-time for the first half of the year, and it was just really too challenging trying to juggle everything. And luckily they had hired someone. So like they were fully staffed. So it was like, okay, I think this makes sense for me to step away. You guys have all the support you need. And that was at the end of January.
Wow. Wow. How exciting.
Yeah, it's been interesting.
Yeah. So what is the name of your business? Where are you located?
So similar to your platform, Empowered Psychological Services, but if you see it printed, the E in ed is capitalized, to have the focus on education. And I am located in Marin County, which is about 20 minutes north of San Francisco. So North Bay Area.
Awesome. And what kind of services do you provide?
I've been doing a mix of things. I do some private assessments for students anywhere from kindergarten to, I have a client that is in his sophomore year in college.
Okay.
So kind of that K to post high school age range. I have been supporting a charter school that needed some help with assessments, but didn't have a full-time school psychologist on staff. So I've been doing some work for them. I have done a lot of IEEs. So it's just kind of a mix of whatever whatever opportunities have presented themselves.
What made you feel like you wanted to move into private practice versus working for the schools?
That's a great question. I think it was a combination of, personal and professional reasons. On the personal front, I have identical twin daughters who are in first grade. And I think when I, chose the path of school psychology, I thought this will be great. My kids will be in school and I'll be at work, and, we'll have breaks together. I didn't anticipate when they started elementary school how many activities are during the school day that parents, aren't required, but, your kids want you to be at these events, whether that's the Halloween parade or the Christmas party or volunteering at centers. So I learned pretty quickly that I was missing out on a lot of things and events that my kids wanted me to be present for. And knowing as child development experts that we are, at some point in the near future, they probably won't want me to be around much. So I thought, I should take advantage of this time period where they want me around and want me to participate in their school activities and drive on field trips. And working a school schedule makes that really challenging. And then professionally, like I've been a school psychologist for 13 years in all different settings, for county offices, for high SES schools, for very low SES schools, for all different age ranges. And I feel like I got a really great experience just kind of learning how different systems work and different assessment tools. Even between California and Massachusetts, they use a lot of different assessment tools. So, I think I was ready for a new challenge. And I think also I'm sure a lot of school psychologists can relate. It can be tricky to work in a system. I feel like we probably all have these moments where you want to recommend something or you want to provide something, but you really have to work within the confines of school budgets and staffing. And it's, I found myself helping neighbors and friends navigate the IEP process and the assessment and what do these terms mean. And it's kind of like, I want to help people have greater access and understanding to school-based services, what's a 504, what's an IEP. And I really enjoy that. I think that there's a pretty significant information asymmetry between what we as school psychologists know and what just a typical family knows. There's a lot of information that parents don't have, and I think that puts them at a disadvantage. And when, you see people you care about, family members, friends, neighbors struggle through the process because they don't have the information or the background, I think it just made me want to be in a different role in this world. I really like supporting parents and supporting students and being able to give them all of the information or options, which as a school psychologist, you don't always have the luxury of doing.
Right, right. Yeah, it's always so powerful. I had a mom call this morning who, was asking about assessment, but when I started asking her, just give me a little bit of information, turned out she was speaking parent language and I was interpreting it into what I understood to be happening. And from her perspective, there was a school psychologist at a school and she wanted testing for her daughter. And the school psychologist said, well, we have this 8-week program and we are going to do this 8-week program and then we'll see how that goes. And then we will see if she needs to be evaluated. But then the student got moved to a different school with a different family member. And it was in a different district. So then mom thought, well, now it's all for naught, and they don't have a school psychologist there. Oh. I'm like, okay, so what you're saying, what I understand is they were doing RTI, right? Like, so you said there's an issue. They're, going to do this 8 weeks of intervention, see how it goes, then do an assessment. And I said, what you don't know is that school does have a school psychologist. They just might not be there all the time, right? But there is one there. So I just helped her understand that she could still ask for the student to be assessed at that school district. Then I had to talk her through, but it's like middle May. They're not going to do it this year, but even if the student comes back, they will still do it, so I had to talk her through all those pieces, but it feels really good to be able to talk a parent through these pieces, because one of the things I really realized when I got into private practice is how much parents don't know about this system and how much they kind of like how much we can do even as school. It made me a better school psychologist because I was still a school psychologist, right? So it made me a better school psychologist when I was still a school psychologist because it just gave me that insight. And then when I left, it's like just the best feeling to be able to be transparent and helpful, and they trust you.
Yeah, it feels great. I mean, even the vocabulary is confusing. Like families they know, terms like dyslexia or ADHD. Some parents even still think it's called ADD. Mm-hmm. So there's like these terms in our society that people think is one thing. And then you have to say, okay, well, if you're going to go through a school-based assessment, we have to teach you new vocabulary. And, what's the difference between a school-based assessment and a private assessment? And I find myself just talking to families a lot about these things and realizing, wow, there's so much that families don't know. And I think that that's been really gratifying to help them navigate the process. And sometimes that turns into business and sometimes that doesn't, but I feel good knowing that I can be a resource.
Right. Absolutely. And it comes back, like, even if that person is not someone you help, like they might remember how helpful you were, so that when their friend says, oh, I'm wondering about this, they might refer them your way,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I realized actually after having like the same conversations over and over again, I was telling my husband, I said, why don't you put this on your website so people can refer and read it themselves when they have time? And I was like, why didn't I think of that? And it's been really amazing to see, like, I can see the traffic on my website and the pages people go to, and it's a lot of the same things. What's an IEP? What's a 504 accommodation plan? What happens if I disagree with an IEP? Like all of those things that families don't know, and I'm happy to talk to them about it, but I'm getting a lot of traffic to my website that just give, pretty short explanations as to what these things are and what these processes are. So hopefully parents can better navigate the whole process.
Yep. Yep. So have you found, as you've been doing this private work, have you been gravitating toward any kind of like niche? Is there, a kind of, assessment that you're very passionate about, or where do you find yourself doing most of your work, or is it all over the place?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I feel like I get a lot of calls from parents of kindergarten, first and second graders with concerns about reading. Mm-hmm. So of course, that's the crucial time when kids are learning those foundational skills. So if students are not making the progress that families or teachers expect that they should be making, especially when you're comparing them to their peers, that's when parents get, nervous and concerned. So I get a lot of calls for, I'm worried my child has dyslexia. So I do a lot of, kindergarten, first, second grade kiddos. And then I get a lot of requests for middle and high schoolers for ADHD or mental health issues, depression, anxiety, especially in high school. There's a lot of that with adolescents, and executive functioning. I think there's a profile of students who are bright, and with enough support and scaffolding as they go through elementary school, they can kind of make it work or hang on. And then a lot of times they get to high school, and especially after freshman year, these scaffolds are peeled back. And even really bright students, as we know, can really struggle with attention and executive functioning. So that's, I think, when things start to become problematic. So I get a lot of requests from families of like sophomores and juniors, and they're having trouble keeping track of all their assignments, and things are late or lost. So I see a lot of that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. As you have made this shift into private practice, what are things that you have felt like have been the most challenging, whether it's business or in your just kind of clinical work? Like, where have you found, and then what have you done about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think
what's helped you.
Yeah, a lot of people, have said it on this podcast that you're leaving, an arena where you are probably very comfortable and you're an expert, and, laws and rules and assessments, and then all of a sudden you're in this other world of business. And, I personally knew nothing about business, from, the nuts and bolts part of it to also like the emotional part of it, the nuts and bolts of how do you set up your business documents, websites, setting up QuickBooks, if that's what you want to do, or DocuSign accounts, gathering materials, which are so expensive. So like all of those pieces, like I am very fortunate. My husband went to business school, so he helped me with a lot of that. But I think some great advice I've heard from other podcast guests is ask for help. This field seems to attract a lot of very type A, perfectionistic, high achieving people, which is amazing, but it's really uncomfortable when we venture out into a world that we have no experience or familiarity with. So don't be afraid to call for help, whether that's an attorney reviewing your contracts or a marketing person who that's what they do all day. That's their area of expertise. I don't know anything about marketing, whether it's, technical people to help set up a website. Like you gotta call on those people. And I know, like for me personally, it's frustrating when you're not good at things. So, I think there's definitely a learning curve in that sense. And also like the emotional part of it. It's brand new. I feel like a lot of us felt confident and successful in our roles as school psychologists. And then this is a brand new world. And, there's definitely imposter syndrome, and you want to know everything and you want to be an expert on everything. And it's just not possible. Mm-hmm. So I think that has been, a lesson in like, pace yourself, be kind to yourself. What I've learned in the last year is insane. It's just such a steep learning curve, but you're never going to know everything.
Yeah.
So I think I have to remind myself of that regularly. Like, you're never going to know it all. Keep learning every day, keep growing, push yourself outside your comfort zone, but you're never going to be an expert on everything, and that's okay.
Yeah. And so what have you done to do more learning? Like, what kinds of resources have you turned to? What have you found to be helpful in that way?
I think lots of trainings. We've talked about Jenny Ponzurek. She has amazing trainings. I love her
Mhm.
training. People have also talked about the Testing Psychologist Facebook group. I always find that so fascinating
Yeah.
when people, present cases, data, and everyone has sort of a different perspective or things that I wouldn't have considered. And I'm like, oh, like I wouldn't have even thought of that. So I love that. That's like graduate course in itself, just watching all the comments and reading everything.
You can get continuing education credits for
I
listening
know
to
that.
certain podcasts.
Yeah, that's on my list of to-dos. Uh, also collaborating with other people in this field. Like, I feel really lucky to have met you and collaborated with you, and, just groups that we've formed of other LEPs, because it's a little bit lonely when
Yeah.
you're I'm a solo practitioner. So there are situations or cases that you just want to bounce ideas off someone or see if there's another way to approach a situation or an assessment. So that has been really helpful to, reach out to other people and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? That's been amazing. Yeah, so I think trainings, collaboration, support groups, that's been really, really helpful. It's such a sort of niche field.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't know what we do or what our degree, like the acronym even stands for. So
Right.
there's not exactly, like I belong to a local chapter of the California MFT Association, which is, it's so nice of them to have non-MFTs join. But even that has expanded my understanding and aperture for clinical issues. So, and it's also another great way to refer, you know, to other practitioners or have them refer to you. There's tons of trainings. So I've just tried to like join everything,
Yeah.
regroup, and just like soak everything up and make connections and learn. And that's been like really, really valuable.
Yeah. And are there other things that you can say in terms of like marketing or meeting people that have been helpful for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have mentioned their approach is sort of like an email campaign of all the people that we overlap with professionally. So whether that's pediatricians, directors of special education attorneys, speech therapists, occupation therapists, private schools, so I did a mass campaign, and you get some responses, but to be honest, if someone I didn't know sent me like a cold email, I don't know if I would be super engaged. So like I don't
Yeah.
blame people who didn't respond. But it's doing a lot of coffees, which for me personally, I'm not super extroverted. Like I don't love those, networking events or coffees. Like it's not really my comfort zone, but I think you have to push yourself out of your comfort zone and meet all kinds of people. I've had coffees with someone who runs a tutoring company. I've had coffee with different psychotherapists, with education therapists, with just people in the space, just to get an understanding of who's out there, what kinds of services do they provide, to get my name out there. This is what I do if you ever come across someone who has this need. So lots of coffees.
Yeah.
And marketing events. So I wouldn't say I do a ton of those, but if it works in my schedule and it feels like the type of person that I would either be able to refer to or they could refer to me, it seems like a good use of time.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any, like kind of 3-year goal or a 5-year goal that's different from what you're doing now, or where do you see yourself there?
That's a good question. I mean, I think I'm almost at the year mark. Like I passed the exam last April. So I think this is sort of a natural in reflection point.
Yeah.
And it's just been interesting to see what kind of lands on my plate. The different families who reach out for private assessments, working with, charter schools or school districts that are smaller and don't necessarily have the funds or the need for a full-time school psychologist. I think I would like to do more support of school systems, whether that's like I have an interest in dyslexia and, the California state law that was recently passed where, all schools need to screen kindergarten through second graders for dyslexia. I think there's opportunity there, and I have some ideas around that. I also, unfortunately, when we were on the East Coast, had a lot of experience with suicide. So I had a ton of training around that, and we implemented the Signs of Suicide program across 2 extremely large high schools, all 4 grades, every single year. So I feel like I have a really deep understanding and maybe expertise on not only suicide prevention, but suicide postvention. Not something anyone ever wants to be an expert on, but that's just the situation I was in. So, and I've tried to bring that back to schools that I've supported or worked at in California. So obviously I have a passion for that topic, and I think it's a great program. So if there's an opportunity to support schools or school districts to implement programs like that, like I'm pretty passionate about that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. How's just kind of off topic, but on topic, how's your experience been with the test of dyslexia?
I think it's interesting. I was chatting with Misty about it, and it's the way it is organized, I think, is sort of unique. Like, there's a certain way that most tests are organized. And I find it interesting that it's, there's 3 subtests for the screener, and then there's, I can't remember, 8 or 9 subtests in the main kind of test, the comprehensive test. And then from there, you can go to different subtests depending on if the student did poorly on one of the core subtests. So it's sort of like, I don't know, choose your own adventure. So yeah. It's different in that sense, but I kind of like it. It seems more flexible and more targeted. If your student has, a specific area or maybe a few specific areas where they scored poorly, to just keep giving a whole battery just to give it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I like that you can, give the core, I think it's 8 or 9, and then based on their performance, go do more follow-up around that specific area. So I like that. Mm-hmm. I like the questionnaires that you can give to parents and teachers. I find that information really helpful because obviously we collect input from teachers and parents, but not always specifically around reading and reading skills. And so I like that. I like the questions that they ask. So yeah, I mean, it's growing on me. I don't know if I'm going to throw all my other reading assessments out the window, but yeah. I mean, I bought it, I bit. So yeah. I like
Same.
it.
Yeah, I had like a slew of dyslexia assessments, and then like more recently, they have not so I've given it the one time, and I'm gonna hopefully give it a few more times before I, and then be able to incorporate it more into my talks that I give at CASP and stuff. But yeah. But yeah, so far it's just been the one, but I anticipate I'll be giving it a little bit more coming up here. But yeah, so I'm interested to hear how people are feeling about it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and it's pretty easy to administer. So points for that.
Yeah, I still didn't figure out how to administer I don't know if maybe I didn't pay for the online version of the screener or something.
Oh, maybe. Yes. You can do the screener in person or digitally.
Yeah. Okay. I got to figure that out. Okay. Totally off topic.
I know it's so funny you say that because when I was first, diving in and reading the manuals and playing with it, I had this law about, schools needing to screen kindergarten through second graders in the back of my mind. And I thought this would be such an efficient way to, it doesn't take that long. And if you can do it virtually, they could overhead project and you could screen so many kids pretty easily. Yeah. The Department of Education hasn't called me and asked for my opinion, but I think it's a good idea.
Well, they have a work group working on which are going to be the different screeners that districts can choose from. And they had a work group working on that. I don't know what the end result was, but I know somebody who was on that panel. But I'm interested to know what they come up with.
Oh,
It's also interesting that there are so many different screeners, and the screeners touch on different areas, like not all screeners are created equal.
I actually just saw one this morning that came out of the Zuckerberg Chan Foundation. I haven't had a chance to like do a deep dive, but I was thinking, I want to check this one out.
Huh. Send that over to me. I want to know too. All right. Okay. Here is another question. What advice or encouragement would you have given yourself had you, like a year ago? Like, is there anything that you would have told yourself? And what what kind of, I don't know, little tidbits can you give to people who are considering making this shift, whether they want to make it a full-time thing or just a side hustle, or, just to kind of get their feet wet?
Yeah, good question. I think maybe like learn to get uncomfortable or learn to get comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Uh-huh.
When you're doing things you've never done before, when you're in spaces you are not comfortable with, whether that's business plans or SEO or websites, like starting a company is hard and there's going to be things you don't know. And, like I said before, that's really hard for a lot of us because we're like, we get straight A's, we know how to do stuff. But just be patient with yourself. You're going to have highs and lows, and that's part of the journey. That's not a reflection of like you're failing. It's learning any new skill, and lean on people, build a community, ask questions. There's probably a lot of people sitting around that have the same types of questions. So that's why I really love, whether it's a Facebook group or, like a collaborative group that you are a part of, there's a good chance that whatever question you have, other people have, whether that's sexual abuse and molestation insurance or IEE contracts and who owns the protocols and who the report, the district or the family at the same time, like all of those things we're all navigating. So having a community of people to just check in and say, this is how I'm doing this. Is this how you're doing this? Or is this how you're understanding something? Because this is my interpretation of what this language means or what situation happened. And just be patient with yourself. I'm not very good at that. So do as I say, not as I do.
Right. Good advice.
It just takes time. Like I said, I'm really lucky that I have a spouse to help me with a lot of this stuff. He's my CFO and my CMO and all the other C's besides doing the actual work, because I don't have that background and luckily he does. So ask for help. You're not weak if you don't know something. And like a lot of people have expertise in different areas like marketing or website development or, I think it's okay to feel like imposter syndrome sometimes because we're doing things we've never done before. And, while we may have a ton of experience in the school setting and whether that's clinical expertise or assessment prowess, that doesn't mean that you're an amazing record keeper or bookkeeper. When would I have learned how to do that?
Right.
I was just used to getting my paycheck from my school district and that was that.
Yep.
So yeah, just be patient with yourself and kind of enjoy the ride. Like I try to be in a growth mindset place and we try to instill that in our kids just because, you're not good at something. We always say yet,
Right.
like I'm not good at kickball. We say yet.
Uh-huh.
So, we try to, practice what we preach and be patient with ourselves and know that every time you feel like you failed at something or you weren't the best, like that's an amazing learning opportunity for the next time. And, I try to, even the bumps, I try to look back at the bumps and think, okay, well, I probably could have handled that differently, but now I know for the next time.
Right. Yeah. I think that maybe it comes with like being a school psychologist. I don't know, but I think a lot of us are like this where like whenever anything happens, you always kind of look at what can I learn from this? what's the learning opportunity here and how do I grow out of this? And what did this teach me? So I look at it a lot like that too. And you have to, because there are so many things that happen. Yeah.
And also celebrate the wins. Like one of my most favorite parts of this job is at the end of a feedback session with a family and just seeing their face, whether that's relief or understanding or validation. And I'm notorious for letting my feedback sessions go way too long. I have to work on that. But the feeling you get when a parent or parents leave your office and they feel like you understand their kid, you worked really hard, you have, takeaways that they can, action items that they can work on. It just I love that part. That's my most favorite part. And you can see it on parents' faces. The kind of we always felt like something was off or we were worried about this. And then, when the data supports that and you just see this this release of I was right. I'm not crazy. Something maybe was going on. And I'm happy now we have information and recommendations to help support my child. That's my favorite part.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Well, Erin Crawford, if people want to get in touch with you or check out your website and the good work that you're doing, where can they find you?
Oh, so my email is erin@empowered-psych.com. Oh, so it's a dash, not a slash.
Okay. And that's your website too?
Yep. So my website is empowered-psych.com. So
awesome.
hopefully that's, just a resource for parents. Like we were talking about, there's just so much that the public doesn't know. So hopefully people can kind of hop on there if they have a specific question about, what's dyslexia, what's ADHD, what are IEEs. So there's a lot of good stuff on there.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story with us. Yeah, I think it's nice for people to hear just these different stories are so inspiring. And I'm so happy for you. And this, this year for you, you've really, you've come out of the schools,
Yeah. I mean, even that's the hardest part is just making the decision and doing it. It's scary. It's unfamiliar. But I'm really happy with the decision. And I think that's the consensus from most folks who have gone this path. I don't think I've met anyone who said, I regret it. I'm going back to schools.
Yeah, I know. Yep. Well, thank you very much for joining me. And till next time, thanks for listening in, everybody, to the Empower LEP podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Empower LEP podcast. Episodes can be found at empowerlep.com. If you liked what you heard, please leave a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast player. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or if you have any questions for me, don't hesitate to connect. I would love to learn more. I can be found at jana@empowerlep.com.